My parents' haunted house. This may be too long for some people to read, but I had to share. This is the first time I'm posting anything online about this. I'm a 31-year-old woman, married, and recently moved back in with my parents due to moving back to the town I grew up with. My husband and I are taking our time looking for our own place, due to wanting something nice in the area, and that is usually hard to find. This story takes place in my parents' house, starting back 10 years ago. A description of the house for a bit of content. It's a 2-story brick stone house in city limits, but still surrounded by nothing but woods. You have to go through a garage that leads into the kitchen with the first bedroom to your left. Past the kitchen is the main living room, and to the right is the hall that is very open. In this area you will find the main dining room and second living area, but if you continue straight you will see the staircase to your left, and even further straight is my parents' bedroom and bathroom. Going up the stairs, you will come to the third living area. Yes, this is a huge house, with 2 sets of French doors side by side that lead to the outside balcony. Going straight, then a sharp left leads you to the third bedroom and second bathroom. This is where the story takes place. The first time I stepped foot into this house, I immediately felt off. Like something just wasn't right. I felt a presence, but I didn't know what or who it was. I brushed it off, thinking I was just reading too much into it. I continued to feel this for the next couple of years, and because of this, I didn't much enjoy visiting them. My parents liked to gamble a lot back then, so they would ask me to babysit my baby brother and sister one day on the weekend. My boyfriend, now husband, loved them, so he would always babysit with me. The first few times I didn't pay attention to the feeling I would get because we would be busy playing or eating with the kids, and after that things kinda chilled out and we would end up watching movies until it was time for us to go to bed. Now, my husband is a freak of nature. It's like he falls asleep the second his eyes are closed. Me, on the other hand, takes me forever to get comfortable enough to wind down my mind. I also don't sleep well, even when I do finally get to sleep. This night was the first time I saw and heard something in this brand new house. In this room, the bed is facing the doorway, but not directly in front of it. With the double doors open, you can see the front of the staircase and all the way down the hallway. As long as the light is on, that is. This night, only one of the hallway lights were on. I was laying in bed with the TV on, but the volume down low, so I could hear if one of the kids called me. I was almost asleep when I hear one of my siblings coming down the stairs. I open my eyes a bit and wait for them to get to the bottom, but they never do. I don't think anything of it, close my eyes, and begin to drift off again. A few minutes later, I hear again. So I open my eyes and wait, but again they never get to the bottom. This time I sit up and listen. A bit spooked, but nothing I can't handle. I get a bit nervous, but I still go to check and see if they're there. Maybe they're scared to come all the way down or something. No one is there. Confused and thinking I must be dreaming it up, I go back to bed, this time closing one of the double doors. It was a few hours later, around 2:30 a.m., when I feel like someone is very near me, as if they're standing next to the bed right in front of me. Usually, when I popped my eyes open, I would see the green glow of the alarm clock on the bedside table. This time I saw nothing. It was pitch black. I couldn't even see the hallway light on, and the TV had turned off on its own. I felt like I couldn't move. I was awake now, scared to my bones. I was finally able to call out my husband's name loud enough to wake him. He reached over and turned on the light, and right then the scared feeling went away, and I was able to move. I freaked out and started crying. I couldn't begin to explain to him what happened because, even if I had, he didn't believe in those things. So I told him I was having a nightmare and asked him to go check on the kids. When he came back, he said the kids were fine and got back in bed. With the light on, I was able to fall back to sleep, but it took me forever. The next day, I told my mom about what had happened. That's when she told me. She'd been hearing footsteps on the stairs at night, and even saw someone standing by the door at times. She didn't tell anyone because she didn't want to scare the kids. This is when she told me what she had done. She wanted to know what was going on in her house, so she went and bought a voice recorder. One day she decided to use it and went upstairs while everyone was gone. She asked your typical questions of, "Who is here? What do you want? And why are you here?" And then said, "You have passed away and need to go into the light. You are not welcome here." The next day, she decided to leave the recorder in one of the bedrooms upstairs while it was recording for about 4 hours while she was out running errands. I asked if she had checked it, and to my surprise, she said she was too afraid to listen to it alone. I wanted to listen to it. Off we went to the computer and began listening to it after it was uploaded. During the 4 hours she was gone, you could hear something clicking or tapping, sounds of a drawer opening and closing, but we weren't for sure. Then we listened to the part where she was asking questions. Now you could hear a sound that resembled a fan or maybe static throughout the whole thing, so some sounds were indistinguishable. But the one sound we did hear chilled us to the core. When she asked, "What do you want?" it gave us an answer. Changing my brother's name for this, the answer was Jamie. It didn't answer any other questions except for that one. I cried immediately. He wasn't having night terrors for no reason. Something was there for him. Every night. We soon asked a friend to cleanse the house. For a long time, everything has been okay. My brother stopped having night terrors. My mom was able to sleep comfortably, and all was good again. Until now. I've been living in this house for a month and a half. For the last 3 weeks, I've been seeing things everywhere, especially when I am alone. Because of this, I won't stay alone anymore. I get this strong feeling of being watched. I had the feeling of someone pulling on my blanket at night. I think it's time for another cleanse. Oh, and just an FYI, I am the 3rd generation on my mother's side of the family to be able to see spirits. My dad's side of the family has, in the past, before I was born, practiced black magic. I don't like speaking to them, and I won't dabble in any of the spiritual stuff most people do. I stay as far away from it as possible, and I recommend that you do too. Even if you are careful, these spirits can haunt for a long time, even after you're gone. Update. So I'm sitting in the living room floor playing with my nephew. Mom's on the left couch and sister is on the right couch. My nephew has a toy piano that is made of cloth and can be folded up. This piano is behind us in the corner with all my nephew's other toys. We are talking and watching my nephew attempt to walk when the piano makes a sound. It's like someone is pressing the keys slowly. We stop and stare and then look at each other shocked. Then the keys are pressed rapidly until it finally shuts off on its own. Mom and I are not scared. My sister is terrified due to something happening to her last night around midnight. That is a story I will be posting tomorrow. I lived in a haunted house for over a decade. When I was 8 years old, my family moved into the house I grew up in. It wasn't an old house. No one had died in it. And it didn't even feel creepy. Just an average suburban house in your average southern suburbs. The way the house was set up, when you came in the front door, there was a hallway with 2 bedrooms and a bathroom to the right. The large living room in front of you with a half wall separating it from the dining room to the left and the kitchen on the other side of the dining room. Where the kitchen and living room met, there was another small hallway, and the master bedroom, a bedroom that was used as an office, and a bathroom, and then the breakfast nook leading to the laundry and utility area at the end of the kitchen. My room was to the right of the front door, and down the hallway, past the bathroom, with the other bedroom on this hallway used for storage mostly, as I was my mother's only child, and my half-brother and sister didn't live with us and rarely came to visit. The first time anything really happened in the house, I was about 9, and had lost my last tooth. Still being a kid, of course, the tooth fairy was expected. So when I woke up in the middle of the night and saw a figure standing in the middle of my room, I assumed it was the tooth fairy. It was bald and only about 3 or 4 feet tall, about the size of an average child, standing completely still in the middle of my room. I remember my parents telling me if I was awake, the tooth fairy wouldn't leave me any money. So I rolled over and went back to sleep. When I got up the next morning, I excitedly told my parents that I'd seen the tooth fairy the night before. I described what I'd seen, but they told me it was just a dream. For the next several years after that, I continued seeing and hearing minor things in the house. When I was home alone, cabinet doors would open and close. I'd hear dishes being moved around in the kitchen, or catch movement out of the corner of my eye. The most common was often at night I'd wake up and see a young woman hovering over my bed. She was dressed like Rosie the Riveter character from the old posters from the 40s, with the red and white bandana around her hair and a denim shirt. When I would see her, she'd stare at me for a few minutes and then slowly float over my body and out through the wall behind me. I was never afraid of her, though. When I was about 12, my parents divorced, and it was just me and my mother living in the house. By the time I was in my late teens, my mother was rarely home, and my house became the hangout for me and my friends. Most nights, everyone gathering together to play Dungeons and Dragons or something similar after work. One night, we were hanging out, but didn't want to play. So I pulled out a Ouija board I'd picked up at the local toy store a few weeks before, wanting to try it out. We sat in my room to play with the lights out and the door closed, and it went pretty normally. Nothing crazy happening for the most part. The only strange thing that happened was at one point we asked something like, "Show yourself," and at that point we heard the front door open and close, and heavy footsteps come down the hall towards my room. The handle of my door started to turn. One of the guys jumped up and locked the door before it could open. We didn't hear anything else. No footsteps moving away from the door, anything. And after a little while, we turned on the light and opened the door to see if my mother had come home unexpectedly. The house was empty and the front door was locked. We decided we'd had enough of the game at that point and put it up, and everyone went home. A few weeks later, we were hanging out at my house again, this time playing Dungeons and Dragons, though one of the girls that usually came had to work late and had classes in the morning, so she'd said she wouldn't be coming. While we were sitting in the living room to play at around 2 in the morning, suddenly we heard footsteps run across my wooden front porch. It sounded like someone very short or a small child running quickly. Everyone in the room heard it, and we had a conversation as to if our friend had changed her mind and had just arrived, as she was very short, and it made more sense than a child running through the neighborhood at that time of night. When she never came into the house, we all got up to look, and there was no one outside, and her car wasn't in the yard. Her boyfriend, who was with us, gave her a call and verified that it wasn't her, as she'd just arrived home on the other side of town and was headed to bed. Around this time, the activity in the house picked up. I saw shadow figures with red eyes, often in the living and dining room of the house, footsteps and other noises at all hours of the day or night. I started waking up in my room to see hooded figures standing near my window and door. It was around this time my half-brother, who I was close to, passed away. It was sudden, and I hadn't seen him in years, as he'd gotten into drugs, and my mother had decided to keep me away from him because she didn't want him to be a bad influence on me. After that, I'd wake up hearing his voice saying my name in the middle of the night, often. On a whim one night, I sat down and typed out a letter to him on my computer. It was in my bedroom, since I was home alone that night and was bored. Now, this computer was hooked up to my old dot matrix printer, one of the really loud kind that makes all kinds of racket when it's running. After I wrote the letter, I felt silly for it and deleted it without saving or printing it, and shut down the computer before I went to bed. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up and my bed was soaking wet. At first I thought my puppy had peed on the bed because he was too small to get down, and even though he was housebroken, I'd taken him out just before bed. I got up to let him outside and change my sheets when I realized the wet was just water, and it was more than a tiny puppy could have made. On my way to take the blankets to the laundry room, I passed the bathroom in my hallway and noticed the light was on, even though I'd turned off all the lights before going to bed. There, sitting on the counter, was a pitcher from the kitchen, with the inside still wet. When I was really young, my brother used to wake my sister and I up by throwing water on us, because it made me laugh. When I got back to my room and started making my bed, I noticed a piece of paper laying on top of my printer. It was the letter I'd written to him and never saved or printed. The computer was still shut down and the printer was off, but it had been printed out. Tore off the paper and laid on top as if someone had read it. The normal things like this continued for a few years when I lived there off and on, before turning dark shortly before I moved out of the house for good. The hooded figures appeared more often. I woke up one night with the feeling that I was being stared at, only to roll over and see what looked like a rotting corpse a few inches away from my face. And one night woke up to a hooded man standing at the foot of my bed, with my bedroom door open when it had been closed before. He held up his hand and a ball of blue light appeared in his palm, which he threw at my face. He and the ball disappeared just before it hit me, but the room was so cold I could see my breath on a normally hot southern summer night. When I was in my early 20s, after I moved out for good, I had one last experience in the house. My mother hadn't been to the house in months and was preparing to sell it. I'd told one of my cousins about the things that had happened there through the years, and he decided that one night, out of boredom, he and a friend of his would pick me up to go ghost hunting in the house while it was empty. We each had a camera, and he had a voice recorder that we brought. He set the recorder in my old bedroom and spent an hour or two wandering around the house taking pictures. When we got done, we came back to my room and sat to listen to the recording and discuss all the nothing that we'd found. On the recording, we could hear our voices moving from room to room and talking about how my cousin's friend's camera had a sexy shutter sound, and the fact that my camera stopped working almost as soon as we walked in the door. About 20 minutes into the recording, when we could hear all three of our voices echoing from the other side of the house, a deep voice that sounded like it was right up against the microphone on the recording spoke, "Get the fuck out." We immediately obliged. I found out a few years later that my mom actually had several experiences in that house, with waking up to find an older man in his 50s or 60s looking through her closet, or seeing him just wandering around the house. When she'd say anything to get his attention, he'd turn around and look at her, and then vanish. She always thought she was just dreaming or something, but everything I saw over the years at that house, I can't help but think it was something else.